Maduka sat alone under the shade of an old mango tree, staring blankly at the dry farmland stretching out before him. The sun blazed overhead, but his mind was preoccupied with thoughts of his struggles. Despite years of hard work, life had only rewarded him with endless poverty. His mud house, patched with leaves and worn-out mats, stood as a testament to his failure. "What is the point of all this suffering?" he muttered, kicking a small stone. His peers, who once farmed alongside him, had built mansions, married, and settled into comfortable lives. Yet here he was, barely able to afford a decent meal. Just as despair consumed him, a familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "Maduka, you're still here." It was Obiora, his childhood friend. Maduka looked up to see Obiora dressed in a neatly tailored suit, a gold wristwatch gleaming in the sunlight. In his hand, he dangled the keys to a new car parked nearby. "Obiora!" Maduka exclaimed, surprised by his friend's transformation. Obiora grinned, his confidence evident. "You look like you've seen a ghost. How? How did you make it?" Maduka stammered, unable to hide his curiosity. Obiora sat beside him and laughed. "Maduka, wealth doesn't come by labor alone. If you're ready to take risks, I can show you the way." Maduka's heart raced. For years, he had dismissed such talk as nonsense. But looking at Obiora's transformation, he felt a surge of hope and desperation. "Tell me what to do," he said firmly. "Good," Obiora replied. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to someone who can change your life forever." The next day, Obiora led Maduka to a remote village deep in the forest. The path was narrow and winding, surrounded by tall trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. Eventually, they arrived at a shrine decorated with skulls, red and white cloths, and strange carvings. An old man emerged from the shrine, his eyes sharp and piercing. He wore a robe made of animal skin, and his fingers were adorned with rings carved from bone. "What brings you here?" the spiritualist asked in a deep voice. "My friend seeks wealth," Obiora replied, gesturing toward Maduka. The spiritualist stared at Maduka carefully. "Wealth comes with a price," he said. "Are you ready to pay it?" "Yes," Maduka replied, his voice trembling but determined. The spiritualist nodded and led them inside the shrine. He brought out a clay pot filled with a strange liquid and began chanting. After a long silence, he turned to Maduka and said, "You have three options: sacrifice a close family member, sleep with a python and never marry, spend every night in a graveyard for 6 months." Maduka froze, the weight of the choices sinking in. "I can't kill my family," he said, horrified. The thought of spending nights in a graveyard sent shivers down his spine. Reluctantly, he chose the second option. "Very well," the spiritualist said. He began another ritual, summoning a large python that slithered into the room. "This python, or genie, will live with you. It will bring you wealth, but you must never harm it or let anyone else harm it. You must also remain unmarried." Maduka hesitated briefly, but his desperation pushed him forward. "I agree," he said. The spiritualist performed a final incantation and handed Maduka a talisman. "Take this. It will protect you, but remember, disobedience will bring destruction." Maduka returned home with a strange mix of fear and excitement. Within days, he began finding bags of money in his house. At first, he thought it was a dream, but as the money continued to appear, he realized the ritual had worked. He bought a plot of land and built a mansion, complete with marble floors and expensive furniture. His wardrobe was filled with designer clothes, and he purchased several flashy cars. The villagers watched in amazement, unable to explain his sudden rise to wealth. But while his life transformed outwardly, Maduka lived with a secret burden. Orgiony, the python, slithered through his house at night. Maduka avoided relationships and ignored the whispers about his bachelorhood, focusing solely on his riches. One day, his mother came to visit. She stood in awe of his mansion, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Maduka, how did you achieve all this?" she asked. "Hard work, Mama," Maduka lied, avoiding her gaze. His mother smiled, but her suspicion lingered. One evening, Mama Maduka decided to pay her son a surprise visit. She entered the house and froze in shock at the sight before her, a massive python slithering across the living room. "Jesus! Maduka! What is this?" she screamed, grabbing a broom to attack the snake. "Stop!" Maduka shouted, rushing to her side. He snatched the broom from her and picked up the python with his bare hands. "It's harmless, Mama. Don't touch it." Mama Maduka's heart pounded as she watched her son carry the snake to his room. "Maduka, what kind of abomination is this?" she demanded. "It's nothing, Mama," Maduka replied, his voice firm. "Don't tell anyone about this." But Mama Maduka couldn't stay silent. She returned to the village and told the family what she had seen. Word spread quickly, and soon the villagers began whispering about Maduka and his python companion. The rumors about Maduka and the python spread like wildfire. The villagers began avoiding him, crossing to the other side of the road whenever they saw him approaching. Children whispered stories about the man who lived with a snake, and adults warned their families to stay away from his mansion. Even Maduka's siblings refused to visit. His elder brother, Ikechukwu, confronted him one day. "Maduka, is it true what Mama said? That you're keeping a python in your house?" Maduka glared at him. "I don't owe you any explanation. Leave my house if you've come to judge me." Hurt and disappointed, Ikechukwu left, vowing never to return. The family decided to distance themselves from Maduka completely. Despite their isolation, Maduka was unbothered. "Let them talk," he thought. "As long as the money keeps coming, I don't need anyone." To prove his success, Maduka decided to host a lavish housewarming party. Invitations were sent to influential people in the community, including wealthy businessmen, politicians, and even local chiefs. On the day of the party, Maduka's mansion was adorned with bright lights and expensive decorations. Exotic dishes and expensive wines were served, and live music filled the air. Guests marveled at his wealth, praising his generosity and success. "Maduka, you've truly made it," one guest exclaimed. As the party reached its peak, Orgiany, the python, slithered into the living room. The sight of the massive snake caused an uproar. "Snake! Snake!" Someone screamed, dropping their drink. Guests scrambled to escape, overturning tables and chairs in their panic. In the chaos, Orgiany bit two guests, killing them instantly. Others ran for their lives, trampling over each other in their desperation to flee. Maduka tried to calm the situation. "It's harmless. Please don't panic," he shouted, but no one listened. The survivors reported the incident to the police, who arrived at the scene within hours. Maduka was arrested and charged with endangering public safety. As he sat in the cold, dark cell, he felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. Meanwhile, Orgiany continued to roam freely around the police quarters, causing fear among the officers. Several attempts were made to capture or kill the snake, but the python always managed to escape. One night, Orgiany slithered into the office of the police chief, who narrowly escaped being beaten. Furious, the chief ordered that the snake be killed immediately, regardless of Maduka's objections. Maduka pleaded with the officers. "You can't kill it. If you do, something terrible will happen." But the police ignored him. A team of officers cornered Ojani in the courtyard and shot it multiple times. The python let out a chilling hiss before collapsing, its body lifeless. The moment Ojani died, Maduka felt a strange emptiness. That night, the bags of money that had been appearing in his house disappeared. His cars broke down, and his mansion began to deteriorate rapidly, as though it was cursed. In his cell, Maduka received a vision of the Spiritualist. "You disobeyed the sacred agreement," the Spiritualist said. "Now, you will pay the ultimate price." Maduka screamed, begging for forgiveness. But the vision faded. The next day, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for negligence and the deaths caused by Ojani. His wealth was gone, and his name became synonymous with greed and shame. After serving his sentence, Maduka returned to his village as a broken man. His mansion was now a crumbling ruin, overtaken by weeds and decay. His family refused to welcome him back, and the villagers treated him like an outcast. Maduka spent his remaining days wandering the streets, begging for food and shelter. The once proud man who had flaunted his wealth was now a shadow of his former self. One fateful night, Maduka was found dead under the same mango tree where he had once dreamed of a better life. The villagers told his story to warn others about the dangers of greed and desperation. Maduka's wealth came with a price, they would say, and in the end, it cost him everything.
Maduka's story is a haunting reminder that shortcuts to success come at a terrible price. If you found this story gripping and want to see more powerful tales like this, stories that teach, inspire, and warn, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another cautionary tale.